Chapter 46:18. Murong Yixian smiled and said, I've seen them. I found out about your situation from their mouth. He paused and looked at Hao and the others, asking, Do you know him? His gaze fell on the masked man. I don't know him, but he saved us. Yue said. Hearing this, Murong Yixian cupped his hands towards the masked man and bowed. I'm Murong Yixian. Thank you for saving my friend's son. How should I address you? I saved them. That's my business. What does it have to do with you? The masked man said, his voice cold and somewhat unfriendly. Seeing this, Murong Yixian said, I want to send them back to their parents' side. Please put this child down. This little girl is the disciple I've chosen. The masked man said coldly. He carried her with one hand and didn't intend to hand her over to others. What's more, from his point of view, this little girl's life was his from the moment he saved her. Why should he hand over his disciple to others? Hearing this, Murong Yixian's eyes flashed, but he didn't get angry. He just revealed a refined smile and said, It's a good thing that you've chosen her as your disciple. However, they've been wandering outside for a long time and their parents are very worried. If you don't trust me, why don't you send them back to their parents' side with me? After they've reunited with their parents, you can tell Fingzhou about your intention to accept them as your disciple. It won't be too late to take this child away then. Ha! Do I need you to teach me how to do things? The masked man sneered and seemed somewhat displeased. I want to go back to see my parents. I don't want to be your disciple. Yue said and struggled to get down. Put me down, put me down. I don't want to be your disciple. Sister. Mu Chen pulled her hand and glared at the masked man. My sister won't leave our side. You're not allowed to take her away. The masked man saw that she kept struggling and her delicate little face was full of panic as if she was afraid of being taken away by him. He then said, Don't worry, I'll take you back to see your parents. Hearing this, Murong Yixian glanced at him and changed the topic. Let's go somewhere else first. It's too messy here and you're injured. You need to treat your wounds. He lowered his head and looked at Mu Chen. Silver Wolf. Hao called out and saw the wolf who was teaching a lesson. Silver Wolf turned and came to his side. At the same time, it looked at Murong Yixian who appeared. How are those people? Hao asked. The people he was referring to were the elders and sect leader of the sect. That sovereign pretended to be unconscious and watched from the back. Once the enchantment was broken, he was the first to escape. As for those elders, I taught them a lesson. Every one of them suffered heavy injuries, but they were not fatal. Silver Wolf said and asked, That sovereign, don't you want to kill him? Hao glanced at the surroundings. With them as the center, no one came near, and no wolves came near. A few meters away from them, the ground was littered with corpses and limbs, and the ground was covered in blood. It was a ghastly sight. Chapter 46:19. Thus, in this chaotic battle, the masked man and Murong Yixian took the 3 children and 17 and quietly left this place, in a town about a few hundred miles away from the sect. In a room of a restaurant, the 3 children, Murong Yixian and the masked man were sitting around the table. There were more than 10 dishes on the table. At this moment, the masked man was picking up food and putting it into a small mountain in front of Yue. Eat. He looked at Yue and indicated for her to eat quickly. Yue looked at the small mountain of food in front of her and couldn't help but be stunned. She was a little dazed and muttered, There's so much, how can I finish it? If I really finish it, my stomach will burst. Then eat what you like. Don't eat what you don't like. The masked man said and asked, Which dish do you like? Just let her pick it up herself. She won't be able to finish so much for her. Muro Nishien said and shook his head with a sigh. He scooped a bowl of soup for the 3 children. Drink the soup first. Pick up whatever you want to eat and eat slowly. We're not in a hurry, he said warmly. Yu drank a mouthful of soup and then asked, when are we going back? How? And Mu Chen looked at Muro Nishien. They thought that this person should be able to bring them back. Muro Nishien smiled and said, I'll send you back to Feng Manor. When we get there, I'll let them inform your mother. However, I can't let you go back instantly. The journey back from here is still a little far. However, you don't have to worry about your safety if you follow me. All right. Hao nodded and expressed his agreement. Muro Nishien looked at the masked man and took a sip of wine. He asked, Sir, do you know Fengzhou and the others? He wondered if this person was someone Fengzhou knew. I've heard of them but never seen them, the masked man said. Until now, he still hadn't told them who he was. I see that your strength is unfathomable. Thinking about it, you must have an extraordinary background. Muro Nishien wanted to fish for information from him. However, this person was unmoved by force or persuasion. He couldn't get anything out of him. The masked man drank his wine and didn't say anything. It was as if he treated Muro Nishien as air, ignoring him completely. Seeing this, Muro Nishien did not ask any more questions. He only took care of the 3 children first, letting them eat their fill and rest for a while. Once they had recovered their energy, he would bring them back to Feng Manor. Half a month later Guan Shilin arrived at the boundary of the Heaven Separation Realm. He flew on his sword, unable to suppress the excitement in his heart. He searched all the way and found the floating Fate Immortal Island. From the sect on the island, he found out that the 3 children had been sent to this heaven realm. He immediately rushed over. Along the way, he didn't stop to rest at all. Thinking about it, he wouldn't miss it again, right? The 3 children should be in the sect at this time. When he went and brought them back to see Xiaozhou, she would be very happy. Thinking of this, a joyful smile appeared on his bearded face that he didn't even have time to shave. He directly flew on his sword and arrived at the main gate of the sect. As he flew on his sword, he was a little surprised because he seemed to see that the surrounding trees seemed to be broken. There were also some traces of a battle. He was a little surprised but didn't say anything. He just went up and patted the gate. Open the gate. Open the gate. Chapter 46:20. I'm here to beat someone up. Open the door, Guan Shilin said as he stood outside. When the disciple inside heard the words coming from outside, he thought for a moment before opening the door a little. When he saw that there was indeed only one person outside, and that it was a burly man, he let out a sigh of relief. The man's face was covered by a beard, and his expression was dignified. Although he looked a little intimidating, he was alone and unfamiliar. Perhaps he was a disciple of the sect or someone from a family. Thus, the disciple who opened the door asked, Who are you? Who are you looking for? Do you have 3 children here? The oldest is about 10 years old and is a boy. The 2 younger ones are a pair of twins. They look exactly the same. I'm their uncle. I'm here to pick them up. Before Guan Shilin could finish speaking, he saw the disciple's eyes gradually widen in horror. Then, with a bang, he slammed the door shut. Faintly, there seemed to be panicked cries coming from inside. Guan Shilin touched his nose, somewhat confused. Before he could finish speaking, the disciple slammed the door shut. So, were the 3 children here or not? Thinking of this, he did not wait outside the door. Instead, he gathered his chi and flew into the air, past the sect, and into the sect. Then, He looked down from his high vantage point and saw the disciple who had just slammed the door shut running up the mountain, yelling and shouting. "Oh no! Oh no! The uncle of the 3 children is here." As that disciple's exclamation spread throughout the sect, the disciples who were originally sitting under the tree, practicing their swordsmanship on the open ground, or walking in groups of 3 or 5, all changed their expressions and quickly fled back to their own residences like birds startled by the twang of a bow. "What's going on?" Guan Shilin looked at the somewhat strange scene in surprise and was secretly puzzled. He flew slowly above the sect on his sword. When he saw that the disciple who was running up the mountain saw that there was no one around and wanted to hide, he immediately descended from the sky and landed in front of the disciple. "Speak! What happened here?" Guan Shilin shouted in a low voice. "Ah! It has nothing to do with me, it has nothing to do with me. It was the sect and the elders who pushed the 3 children to the mountain demon ancestor. It really has nothing to do with me." The disciple was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly. With a plop, he knelt in front of Guan Shilin. Hearing his words, Guan Shilin's expression changed. His aura suddenly sank, and a fierce look flashed in his eyes as he shouted, "What did you say? The 3 children to the mountain demon ancestor? How are they now?" As he spoke, he leaned forward, took a step forward, and grabbed the disciple's collar, lifting him up. "Spare my life, spare my life. They are fine. They were saved by someone," the disciple said in a trembling voice. His eyes were filled with fear, afraid that the man in front of him would slap him to death in anger. "You saved him. Where did they go now? Tell me in detail. If you dare to hide anything from me, I'll kill you." Guan Shilin put him down and shouted in a dignified voice. Chapter 46-21. Upon hearing the disciple's words, Guan Shilin's murderous aura began to emanate from his body. His dignified tiger eyes swept across the pale-faced disciple's face as he snorted heavily. Pushing 3 children to their deaths, such a sect is not worthy of being called a righteous sect. There's no need for it to exist. His sonorous and powerful voice was accompanied by a powerful aura that reverberated in the air. As his voice fell, the dark force on his body surged as he lifted his foot and stomped heavily on the ground. Bang! Kacha! His foot stomped heavily on the ground and in an instant, the ground rapidly cracked open, emitting cracking sounds. As the cracks extended to the surroundings, the mountain suddenly rumbled loudly and half of the mountain collapsed, causing debris to roll downwards. Kaboom! Bang bang bang! In an instant, the mountain within the sect collapsed, causing debris to roll down and dust to fly everywhere. Upon hearing the commotion, the sect leader immediately came out and shouted angrily, "Who dares to be so impudent here?" He had been recuperating in his courtyard for the past few days. Although he was the fastest to escape that day, he was still severely injured by the mountain demon's palm. As for the few elders, they had also been recuperating after being scratched by the sacred beast. However, the injuries on their bodies and the fear in their hearts had yet to subside. As such, they rarely left their courtyards. At this moment, when he heard the sound of the mountain collapsing from within the sect, he immediately came out of his courtyard and gathered his energy to search for the troublemaker. At this moment, he was filled with anger and had nowhere to vent it. Seeing that someone had come to cause trouble in the sect, he immediately prepared to teach this person a lesson. However, when he saw the man standing on the flying sword in mid-air, he frowned slightly and shouted, "Who are you? Why did you destroy my sect's main mountain?" Guan Shilin looked at him and sized him up before asking in a deep voice, "You're the sect leader of this sect?" "That's right, I'm." The sect leader replied. However, before he could finish his sentence, he saw the man snorting heavily. "You've come at the right time. Eat my blade." As soon as his voice fell, the man stretched out his hand and a long saber appeared in his hand. In the next moment, the long saber was waved and slashed towards him with the force of mountains and rivers. The speed and ferocity of the saber shocked him so much that his face changed greatly. Almost without thinking, he dodged to the side in a sorry state. Whoosh! Whoosh! Bang! A sharp gust of wind whistled through the air, bringing with it a powerful wind blade. With a loud bang, the saber slashed downwards. It was a saber chi that could swallow mountains and rivers, directly cutting a mountain behind the sect master into two. Boom! With a loud bang, the entire sect shook. A powerful dark force aura spread out along with the slash of the saber and filled the entire sect. The sect leader turned around in shock, only to see that the mountain peak had been split into two by the astral blade chi, forming two halves of the mountain peak. Between the two halves, due to the vibrations of the astral blade chi, gravel flowed down, forming a gap of about a few meters wide. At the foot of the mountain, dust and sand flew everywhere. Faintly, the cries of the disciples could be heard from the mountain peak. Chapter 46-22. The disciple who had fled to the side when Guan Shilin stomped his foot on the ground saw the sect master's pale face, but he didn't know the man's identity. He immediately said, Sect master, he's the uncle of the 3 children. The sect master, who was already pale, retreated a few meters when he heard this. His face was full of fear. You're Guan Shilin. Fengzhou's sworn brother, Guan Shilin, was a mystic who wielded a long saber. Even though he had never seen him before, he had heard of the people around the legendary ghost Dr. Fengzhou. Now that he saw this man's appearance, the long saber in his hand, and the powerful mystic chi aura he exuded, he was certain that this man was Guan Shilin. Humph. It's good that you know. Guan Shilin waved the large saber in his hand and pointed it downwards. He glared at the sect master in front of him and said, How dare you put my 3 nephews in danger? How do you want to die? The sect master was so frightened that his body trembled. He hurriedly said, I had no choice but to do this. Please be magnanimous and spare my life. Also, the 3 children have already been rescued. If they hadn't been rescued and something had happened to your sect, I wouldn't have just taken your life. I would have taken your entire sect down with them. Guan Shilin shouted sternly. He waved the large saber in his hand and dashed forward. When the sect master saw this, he wanted to turn around and escape. However, his strength was no match for Guan Shilin. Almost as soon as he turned around, he was caught by Guan Shilin. Ah! What are you thinking? Don't do anything rash. The sect master cried out in alarm. He was so frightened that cold sweat seeped out. At this moment, he no longer had the demeanor of a sect master. Guan Shilin grabbed his shoulder and said coldly, Of course I'm going to cripple you. As soon as he finished speaking, he moved his hand and directly crippled the sect master's cultivation. At the same time, he flung his hand and threw him to the ground. Ah! A shrill scream echoed in the sky and spread throughout the sect. However, the disciples, elders, and venerables all heard the scream. However, no one dared to come out. They all hid, hoping that the person would leave quickly. The sect leader was thrown to the ground after having his cultivation crippled. As he fell, he rapidly aged after losing his cultivation. When his body landed heavily on the ground, blood flowed out of his mouth. His body twitched on the ground for a while before he stopped breathing. Guan Shilin looked on coldly as his gaze swept across the entire sect. His dignified voice mixed with the aura of profound energy spread to every corner of the sect, from today onwards. This sect no longer existed. If you don't disperse, I will flatten this place in the future. After leaving behind the threat and warning, he turned around and flew away. That day, when he received news from the Pan family that the 3 children had gone to Floating Fate Island, he finally found the island and found out that they had come to this place. He rushed all the way here, but he didn't expect that he would still be too late. At this moment, he was glad that at least the 3 children had met a benefactor who saved them from danger. Otherwise, he really didn't dare to imagine what kind of bad news he would have heard today. Chapter 46-23. It seemed that he had to go back first and inform Xiaozhou, Qianhua, and the others to see if they could figure out who those 2 people were. At the same time, in another world, Fengjiu was sitting cross-legged in an inn, adjusting her breathing. Suddenly, as if she felt something, she exhaled softly, opened her eyes, and took out her communication jade from her space. Could it be that there's news about the children? Fengjiu's heart skipped a beat when she saw that it was a message from her brother. At the same time, Wanyan Qianhua and the others also received the news from Guan Shilin. After hearing the news, they were all overjoyed and quickly rushed back to the Feng family. It turned out that after Guan Shilin left the sect, he planned to return to the Feng family first. At the same time, he also sent a message to them. He felt that if someone he knew saved the 2 children, they might send them to the Feng family because Fengjiu and the others had many residencies in other heavenly realms. Only the Feng family of the Phoenix dynasty would never change and would always have people from the Feng family. Moreover, Old Master Feng and Feng Shao were all in the Feng family's ancestral residence. There was no better place to send the 3 children than there. Of course, the premise was that the 2 people who saved the 3 children were willing to send them there. After Fengjiu heard the news from her brother, she couldn't help but think carefully. A man wearing a mask. And a man in a white robe with an immortal aura. In her mind, the first person she thought of was Yi Xiran. However, she felt that it was unlikely because from the information her brother said, the man in the mask should be very strong. Yi Xiran's strength hadn't reached that level yet. If it wasn't Yi Xiran, who could it be? And that man in a white robe with an immortal aura. If Mo Chen was still here, then it would undoubtedly be him. However, Mo Chen was probably still on Sky Mountain and couldn't have gone there to save the 3 children. However, if it wasn't Mo Chen, who could it be? For a moment, people flashed through her mind, but she couldn't figure out who it was. After all, the information her brother sent was limited. It was impossible to guess without seeing the person. However, she still walked out of the room immediately. She looked at Leng Hua and Leng Shuang who were guarding the door and said, "There's news of the 3 children." As soon as her voice fell, she waved her hand and a whirlpool appeared. It brought the 2 of them through the whirlpool and into another world. She then said to the 2 of them, "I have to rush back to the Feng family's ancestral home first. You 2 can follow me." As she spoke, she took out the teleportation scroll that could teleport and left first. She could use her fastest speed to go to the Feng family's ancestral home, but she couldn't bring them along. However, with their speed, they should be able to arrive in half a month at the slowest. Before Leng Shuang and Leng Hua could react, they saw that their master had already left. The 2 looked at each other and said, "Let's go back quickly." As they spoke, they took out the transmission scroll from the space and used it to rush back to the Feng family's ancestral home as soon as possible. Chapter 46-24. Father, I just received news from Shilin that there's news of the 3 children. 2 people saved the 3 children and might bring them to us. Feng Shao strode in, his face overflowing with excitement. That's good, that's good. When Feng Sanyuan heard this, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. After so long, there's finally news of them. Are the 3 children well? How are they now? Did Shilin say anything? The 3 children are all well. It's just that they were outside without an adult by their side. They probably suffered a lot. Hearing this, Feng Sanyuan sighed. It's good that they can come back safely. Nothing could compare to the word safe. As long as the 3 children could come back safely, they could rest assured. Go tell Wanru and the others. I'll wait at the city gate. When Feng Sanyuan heard this news, he couldn't sit still at home and immediately wanted to go out. Father, they'll come here when they come. You might not be able to wait for them at the city gate. Besides, Shilin sent news back. We don't know how long it will take for them to arrive here. I think it's better to wait at home. Feng Shao pulled him back and said. Seeing this, Feng Sanyuan stopped and thought for a moment, then said, That's fine. Did you get someone to tidy up the courtyard where they live? Remember to tell the gatekeeper that when they arrive, they must report immediately. Okay. I'll go tell them. As Feng Shao spoke, he was about to walk out when he felt the fluctuation of spiritual power in the air. In the next moment, there was a flash of light and Fengzhou, who hadn't returned for a long time, appeared in front of them. Feng girl. Xiao Zhou. Feng Sanyuan and Feng Shao called out in surprise and quickly walked to her side. Why are you back so soon? We just received news from Shilin not long ago. We thought it would take 2 days for you to arrive. Feng girl, why have you lost so much weight? Did you not eat much? Feng Sanyuan saw that she had lost a lot of weight compared to last time and couldn't help but feel distressed. His heart ached for this granddaughter of his. In addition, she had suffered so much outside. All these years, they had not been able to help her much. Seeing that she had lost so much weight after coming back this time, his heart could not help but ache. Fengzhou smiled, a trace of exhaustion in her expression, and said, I'm fine. It's just that I've lost my appetite recently. Then how about this? Go back to the courtyard and rest. When the children arrive, you don't need to do anything. The family will take care of things. You just have a good rest. As Feng Shao spoke, she saw the tiredness between her brows and let her rest first. She thought to herself that she should go back and tell Wan Ro to go to the kitchen and tell her to make some light food for little Nine. She wanted to help her recover as much as possible. When Fengzhou heard them say this, she didn't refuse and softly said, Okay. I'll go see grandmother and mother first, then go to the courtyard to rest. Leng Hua and Leng Shuang should arrive later. This time, I came back first. What about Immerse? Why didn't he come back with you? Feng Sanyuan asked. It was strange that she was the only one who came back first. The smile on Fengzhou's face faded, and she said, He shouldn't be coming back now. Chapter 46-25. All right. Feng Shao responded and said to Fengzhou, Let's go. I'll accompany you to see your mother and grandmother. They've been talking about you. If they know that you've returned, they'll definitely be very happy. Also, I haven't had the time to tell them about the news of Shilin's 3 children. It's a good opportunity to tell them and let them be happy. Fengzhou responded softly and left with him. Watching them leave, Feng Sanyuan walked in the courtyard with his hands behind his back, deep in thought. Could it be that something had happened to Immerse? He couldn't help but think of the thunder from before and the matter of Shilin leaving in a hurry. However, until now, no one had told them what had happened at that time. They originally thought that it shouldn't have anything to do with them. However, looking at it now, they were afraid that, it looked like when Shilin and the others returned, they would have to ask them properly. 3 days later, in the evening, at the city gates. Murong Yixian looked at this familiar yet strange place in a daze. He felt a sense of loss. This place held too many memories of him. Too many things had happened in this place. He didn't expect that he would return here again. This subordinate greets the three young masters. The Phoenix guards who had received orders and were waiting at the city gates immediately appeared when they saw the three familiar young masters. Someone quickly went back to report. Muro Ni Xian looked at the guards who had appeared and his eyes flashed. He asked, "You are the Phoenix guards?" His gaze turned and fell on the Phoenix tokens at their waists. Yes. The two Phoenix guards also recognized him. When they saw that he was the one who had escorted their three young masters back, they were secretly surprised. They immediately cupped their hands and thanked him. "Thank you, Master Murong, for escorting our three young masters back. Your family's master and master are at home, right? After bringing them back, let them inform Fengzhou to return as soon as possible." As he spoke, he glanced at the masked man who hadn't spoken. When the Phoenix guards saw this, they followed his gaze and looked over. Just now, they saw this person who had been carrying their family's young miss. Just by looking at his loving and caring appearance towards their young miss, they guessed that the other party might be someone their master knew. However, when they heard Murong Yixian's words this time, they also became a little vigilant. One of the Phoenix guards said, "My master returned a few days ago and is now waiting for the three young masters to return." As he spoke, his gaze swept past 17, who was behind him, and he sized her up with some astonishment. "Master Murong, master, please come with us to the residence." The Phoenix guard turned to the side and gestured for them to enter. When Murong Yixian heard them say that Fengzhou was also in the Feng residence, he was relieved. He said to the Phoenix guards, "Now that the children are here and your master is also in the residence, I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't go over. I'll leave the children to you. Send my regards to Fengzhou and your family's master. I'll take my leave first." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at the three children and said gently, "When you return, you must listen to your mother. It's safest to stay by your mother's side. I'll take my leave first." He smiled and patted Mu Chen's head. Chapter 46-26. Uncle Murong, thank you. Come and play with you, in the future. You also shouted in a childish voice. Murong Yixian's footsteps paused, but he didn't turn back. He only waved his hand and continued to walk forward. His figure gradually went further and further away until he disappeared from their sight. "You, How, Chin, A familiar voice carrying a pleasant surprise suddenly entered the ears of the three children. After the three heard that voice, they fiercely turned back and saw a red figure rushing towards them. "Mother!" The three children shouted in unison. "How?" and Mu Chin immediately ran towards her. You, who was being held by the masked man, struggled while shouting, put me down, I want my mother." The masked man hesitated for a moment before putting her down. Once his hand loosened, they saw her running forward with her short legs. "Mother!" The three children flew into Fengzhou's embrace. Their small hands tightly hugged her as they called for their mother. "My children, you're finally back." Fengzhou's heart was moved and her voice carried a trace of choking. Her hands tightly hugged the three children. When she felt that they were truly in her embrace, her heart that had been anxious and worried was finally put down when she saw them safely return to her side. "Mother, how missed you so much. Mother, how took care of little brother and sister. How who usually had a grave and stern face, would only reveal a childish expression when facing Fengzhou." Hearing his words, Fengzhou nodded. Reaching out, she stroked his head and gently smiled. Mother knows. Mother knows that my Hao has always been a good older brother. Mother knows that you will definitely take good care of your little brother and sister when mother is not by your side. A loving voice gently came from her mouth. She hugged him and gently kissed his forehead. Hao immediately smiled. He smiled happily, just like a child who was praised, revealing a happy and satisfied smile. Mother, you also wants a kiss. You softly called out, and at the same time, she leaned forward with her pink and tender little face. You wants mother to kiss my cheek. Mu-chin was a little embarrassed, but when he saw his mother kissing his brother and his sister leaning forward, he said shyly, Mother, Chin wants it too. Seeing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh. She lovingly rubbed their hair and softly replied, Good. You are all mother's little darlings. Mother will kiss each and every one of you. As she spoke, she kissed both of their little faces. Seeing them smiling happily, she couldn't help but smile happily as well. After taking a good look at the three children, Fengjiu stood up and stood beside the three children. Only then did she look at the masked man and the young man dressed as a guard. May I ask who you are? She looked at the masked man, and a dark light flashed in her clear eyes. She calmly sized up the person in front of her, and she was secretly surprised. With her cultivation, she actually couldn't see through this person's strength. Did he hide it too well? Or was his strength really unfathomable? Chapter 46-27. Hearing this, Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and looked at him deeply. He didn't say anything and just made an inviting gesture. Sire, you must be tired after escorting them all the way back. Why don't you rest in the residence first? Seeing this, the masked man nodded and said, All right, I also want to talk to you about Er's apprenticeship. Saying this, he walked forward with large strides. Mother, he is 17. He is a guard given to us by Pan family. Was being carried by Fengjiu, so she hugged her mother's neck and whispered, Mother, this masked man is very strange. He kept asking me to call him master. However, he saved from bad people, so he should be considered a good person. Also, Mother, there is also Uncle Murong who sent us back. However, he left after sending us to the city gate. Uncle Murong. Fengjiu was slightly startled. After thinking for a while, he said, Is it Murong Yixian? At that time, she heard her brother say that two people took away the three children. One was wearing a mask and the other was wearing a white robe that fluttered like an immortal. However, the last time she saw Murong Yixian, he was traveling outside and looked like he had been through hardships. He wasn't wearing white either. Therefore, when she heard her brother mention those two people, she guessed for a long time. However, she couldn't figure out who those two people were. Today, she saw that the masked man's strength was unfathomable. As for the other person, she didn't see him. As it turned out, it was Murong Yixian and he had already left. It's Uncle Murong. Hao looked at her and said, I saw that he didn't want to enter the city. He stood at the city gate and looked at the city in a daze. Then, he said that he wanted to leave. He just left not long before Mother arrived. Hearing this, Fengjiu nodded. I know. When I see him in the future, I will thank him personally. Mother, where is Father? Why didn't Father come? Looked all around but didn't see their father. Fengjiu looked at the daughter in his arms and smiled gently. Your father is in seclusion. He is not here. Along the way, Fengjiu carried with Hao and Mu-chin at his side. After arriving at the Feng residence, Fengjiu first let people take the masked man to rest. Then, he took the three children to the rear courtyard. Feng girl, who is that masked man? Why does he look strange? Feng Sanyuan said with some worry. Thinking back to when they asked him to go and rest first, that person stood motionless, and his pair of eyes kept staring at you. That appearance was as if he was afraid that they would take the child away, which made them feel baffled. Feng Jiu smiled and said, "He is the benefactor of the 3 children. As for who he is, I didn't tell him on the way back, but he said that he is you's master. He probably wants to accept you as his disciple. You is so young. What master does she need? What's more, who is more suitable to teach you than you?" Feng Xiao frowned. Thinking of that person who entered the residence, she didn't know who he was. She also didn't know where he came from. Her heart was somewhat uneasy. "Well, we will talk about the other matters later," Feng Jiu said. Then, she looked at the 3 children sitting in the courtyard. Her divine sense swept over their bodies. She felt that the blood curse in Mu Qin and Mu Yu's body still existed, but the blood curse in Hao Er's body had already disappeared. Her heart couldn't help but move. Chapter 46-28. Mother, after we were sent away by that blood demon's blood curse, the 3 of us fell into a forest in the mortal world. I think it might be because I'm not the biological child of father and mother, so the blood curse was broken by me that night. But the curse on my younger brother and sister's body couldn't be broken, and they also couldn't remember father and mother. Hao Er carefully said, recalling what happened when he brought his younger brother and sister to wander outside without the accompaniment of an adult. Big brother was in a lot of pain at that time, he kept shouting and sweating a lot. We were very scared at that time, but we also took care of him. Yu also said. Hearing this, Feng Jiu's heart ached. It's mother's fault, mother didn't take good care of you. No, mother is very good, we like mother the most. The 3 children said in unison, looking at her with eyes full of admiration. Hearing this, Feng Jiu's beautiful face couldn't help but reveal a smile. She also came to their side and sat down, carrying Yu to sit on her lap, and said to Hao you continue. And, because my strength hadn't fully recovered at that time, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to take care of my younger brother and sister if they encountered danger, so we stayed in that forest for a few days, and then left. At that time, we went to that city, where my younger brother and sister were almost kidnapped and sold. I met Pan Ning there. He told her every detail of what happened in the outside world in these 2 years, talking until the sky turned dark. At that time, that mountain demon old ancestor grabbed my younger sister and threw her to the ground very hard. It was that masked man who suddenly appeared and caught my younger sister and saved her. But when we asked him, he didn't say what his name was. Later, Uncle Murong also came, and they sent us back. Hao said, and stopped here, looking at his mother. When Feng Jiu heard that the 3 children were in danger in that sect, her heart tightened, and the killing intent in her heart also surged. Such a righteous sect actually pushed the 3 children out when they encountered danger, it was really unforgivable. But when she heard that the 3 children were finally out of danger because of that masked man, her heart also relaxed. Fortunately, they turned misfortune into a blessing, otherwise, she really didn't dare to imagine. Mother, although that masked strange uncle is strange, but he is very good to you, Yu's soft voice sounded in Feng Jiu's ears. She was worried that her mother would think that strange uncle was a bad person, so she explained, if he didn't save you, you wouldn't be able to see mother now. Moreover, he also treated you well, he isn't a bad person. Mother. Chapter 46-29. Hearing these words, Feng Jiu couldn't help but was slightly startled, then somewhat laughing, he asked, why did you say he is pitiful? Yu raised her head and looked at her mother, then blinking her clear and pure eyes, she softly said, because if I don't talk to him, he will just sit there and not talk. He also doesn't talk to other people. Moreover, he will often be in a daze, as if he is thinking about something. She said again, but when you talks to him, he will be very happy. He will laugh, and will also let me call him master. Moreover, he will also take out delicious fruits for you to eat. Mother, you stealthily kept some fruits that even big brother and brother don't have for mother to eat. She was just like a cunning little fox. While speaking, she took out the fruits that she had hidden on the way from her space and handed them over to her mother as if presenting a treasure. This is 9 treasure fruit. Fingzhou somewhat shocked looking at that spiritual fruit that you had taken out. That was an orange-colored fruit which was the size of an adult male's fist. It took the shape of a flower bud, but in fact, that flower bud-like fruit shape was formed by 9 pieces of fruit flesh. The fruit tip was suffused with bright and glistening red color, and the fruit emitted a faint alluring fragrance. Just smelling this fragrance would make people feel refreshed, as if their whole body was bathed in a gentle spiritual power. Feng Sanyuan, Feng Shao and others at the side looked at that fruit, and were somewhat surprised. They had also eaten many precious and rare spiritual fruits, but they had never seen this one that you had taken out. But 9 treasure fruit. Looking at Fingzhou's appearance, it seemed this thing was not ordinary. Mother, what is 9 treasure fruit? Yu blinked her beautiful eyes and curiously asked. Fengzhou looked at her, then couldn't help but shake his head and said with a smile, Yu, it seems this strange uncle has some background. Mother had only seen this 9 treasure fruit in books, didn't expect. Mother, you ate 2 of them on the way. She stretched out her chubby little finger and shook it, then with a proud face, this is the 3rd fruit, but you was unwilling to eat it, so while strange uncle wasn't looking, I hid it. Strange uncle didn't know. Xiaozhou, is this fruit very precious? What was the use of it? Will Yu's body be able to endure eating too? Feng Shao couldn't help but ask. Fengzhou chuckled and said, this fruit is not ordinary. It can be considered a top-grade immortal fruit. If an ordinary person smells it, his or her lifespan will increase by 100 years. If he or she eats it, even an ordinary person without spiritual roots can enter the world of immortals. If a cultivator eats it, his or her lifespan will increase by 1,000 years. Moreover, it can make his or her spiritual qi stronger and purer. Fengzhou continued, not only that, if a dying person eats it, they can be saved and their strength will return to its peak. According to the records, it takes 9,000 years to grow, another 900 years to bloom, and another 900 years to bear fruit. The fruit also takes another 900 years to mature. Therefore, this fruit is called the 9 treasures fruit. It is a celestial fruit and not a spiritual fruit. It is very precious. Chapter 46:30. Fengzhou couldn't help but chuckle and pinch her little cheeks. President, you will grow up, don't worry. You will grow into a beautiful lady in the future. You wants to be as beautiful as mother when she grows up. She said with a smile, her beautiful eyes curved into crescents. Mother, we owe the Pan family a debt of gratitude, so when we left, we said that if there was a chance in the future, please treat young Master Pan's legs so that he can stand again. How gaze fell on her as he spoke. Fengzhou smiled and said, yes, mother understands. In a few days, mother will bring you to visit him again to have a look. Hearing this, Hao smiled and nodded. Only then did he not say anything. Chen how is your health? Fengzhou asked, looking at her son who didn't speak much. She reached out to touch his head and asked, are you okay? Yes, I'm very healthy. Mother, don't worry. Mu Qin paused for a moment before continuing, it's just that the blood curse on our bodies has not been completely removed, but the symptoms that appeared a while ago have disappeared recently. He hesitated for a moment before asking, "Mother, how is father?" They originally thought that their physical condition might be related to their parents' condition. When they saw their mother today, they saw that she was fine, but their father was nowhere to be seen. It seemed that something had happened to their father, but their mother didn't say anything. Hearing this, Fengzhou's eyes flashed and the smile on her face faded a little. "Mother, did something happen to father?" Yu-Er asked, her eyes overflowing with worry. When Feng Sanyuan and the others saw this, they looked at each other and looked at Fengzhou in unison. A few days ago, they weren't clear, but after asking these two people, they more or less knew what happened to Mose. Now that the three children asked, should they tell them? "You must not have had a good rest on the way back, right? It's getting late, go take a hot bath and rest. As for your father's matter, mother will find a time to tell you," Fengzhou said softly, looking at the three children with a smile. When the three saw this, they didn't ask any more questions and just nodded in agreement. "I'll take you there," Wanrong said and stepped forward to hold Hao-er's hand while saying to Fengzhou, "I'll take the three children back to the courtyard first. You come over later. Keep them company." "Okay, I know," Fengzhou replied. After watching them leave, the smile on her face and a trace of exhaustion, she gently rubbed between her brows. "Phone girl, don't plan to tell the children about Mose?" Sanyuan asked, looking at her tired face, and couldn't help but sigh. "In 2 days. I'll find a time to tell them," Feng Nine said, then stood up and said, "That person put him in the guest room of the West Courtyard, right?" "Yes, in the guest room of the West Courtyard," Feng Xiao said. "She know where he came from. It's dark now, and you still want to go. Maybe he's already asleep. Why don't you go tomorrow morning?" Feng Xiao suggested. Chapter 46-31. The next morning, Fengzhou got up before the three children even got up. After washing up, she went to the guest room in the West Courtyard. When she arrived at the West Courtyard, she saw the masked man sitting in the middle of the courtyard. When he saw her, he gestured at the seat in front of him. "Sit." Fengzhou glanced at him and stepped forward. He first cupped his hands and bowed to him. "Thank you for saving my children." "You want to thank me?" He looked at Fengzhou and asked. Hearing this, Fengzhou's eyes flashed. He smiled and sat down at the table. "What kind of thank you gift would you like?" "If it's within my means, I won't refuse." "I want your daughter to be my disciple," said the masked man. Fengzhou's expression was normal. He said, "I still don't know who you are. If I tell you, you'll agree." His voice was slightly raised. There was a hint of disapproval in it. Fengzhou did not directly answer his question. Instead, he looked at him and said, "I don't think I've seen you before. However, I can see that your strength is unfathomable. Moreover, you can take out the 9 treasures immortal fruit. It's obvious that you have an extraordinary background. Since that's the case, why do you want my daughter to be your disciple?" Fengzhou paused. He looked at him and continued, "In terms of talent, she may be extremely outstanding, but she's not the only one. Therefore, I don't understand why you insist on her being your disciple." The masked man glanced at him and said, "What reason do I need to find her pleasing to the eye?" Hearing this, Fengzhou frowned slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the masked man's voice. "I was the one who saved that little girl's life. If it wasn't for me, she would have died long ago. So, from the moment I saved her, her life almost belonged to me. Now, I want her to be my disciple. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that." The masked man spoke slowly, his voice somewhat cold. "It's true that you saved her, but but I can use other things to repay you. You, is my child, not an object. She also has her own opinions and thoughts. If she wants to take you as her master, I won't stop her. If she doesn't want to take you as her master, then no matter what you say, I won't agree. As she spoke, she paused and looked at the other party's cold aura. She smiled and said, "You should know who I am. Even if you haven't seen me before, you should have heard of my name. If you want to fight with me, I will accompany you to the end." The masked man narrowed his eyes and seemed a little displeased. He said, "I don't want to be your enemy. I just want to take in a disciple." Fengjiu glanced at him and said unhurriedly, "The disciple you want to take in is my child. Then what do you want in order for you to agree?" He asked in a low voice. "I've already said it earlier. As long as you, is willing, I won't stop her. However, even if she agrees, you still have to reveal your true appearance. At the same time, tell me your real name and origin. Only then can I let my daughter leave with you. Otherwise. The man glanced at her and said, "Otherwise, don't tell me you want to compete with me." Chapter 46-32. Hearing this, the masked man looked at Fengjiu and did not say anything else. He just seemed to be scrutinizing something. After a long while, he said, "The little girl can only grow up safely with me. You can't take care of her now. Moreover, your husband, Xianyuan Mose, is also missing. Do you think you'll be safe with her by your side?" Speaking of this, the masked man's voice softened a little. He stood up and did not look at Fengjiu's slightly changed expression. Instead, he walked slowly in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Suddenly, he stopped and looked at the sky. He said to Fengjiu, "The matters of this world are not so simple. Why do you think you can't control life and death when your cultivation has reached such a high level?" As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at Fengjiu. Seeing her frowning slightly and staring at him, he tugged at the corners of his mouth, revealing a smile that wasn't really a smile. "You've grown too fast, and you've become a threat to some powerful existences. Before you grow strong enough to shake the world, they will find a way to kill you, and even your children won't be spared." Fengjiu's expression was normal, but her heart was not calm. There was a lot of information in his words, and she could not help but think deeply. Including Tian Jizi, who was no longer here, this should be the second person to say such words to her. However, these words were too vague, and she had never touched on them. "You're saying that our existence threatens some powerful existence? What kind of existence is this so-called powerful existence that you speak of?" Fengjiu looked at him and asked. Her voice paused, and then she said, "We've lived in this world for a long time, but we've never met the so-called powerful existence that you speak of. They are not here." "Of course they're not here." The masked man looked at her. "Those who have ascended cannot come here. If they were here, you wouldn't be alive now." Hearing this, Fengjiu frowned. Her gaze fell on him, and her voice carried a trace of vigilance. She asked again, "Then who are you? How do you know these things? Why do I have to be the only one to accept my daughter as your disciple? What's your purpose?" The masked man looked at her and suddenly reached out to take off the mask on his face, revealing the face behind the mask. It was a face that had been burned. His original face could no longer be seen. It could even be said that it was very frightening. However, after taking off the mask, the man looked at Fengjiu with a calm and indifferent gaze, as if that face was not his. His next words confirmed this guess. "This face is a little ugly, so I wear a mask to prevent it from scaring people, especially the little girl that I fancy." Holding the mask in his hand, he walked slowly to Fengjiu and sat down across from her. He placed the mask on the table and waved his hand. The courtyard was immediately enveloped by a gust of air, as if it was isolated from the outside world. Fingzhou's eyes Fingzhou. To prevent those old fellows from eavesdropping. Chapter 46-33. His voice paused, as if he was sighing softly and blaming himself. When I was in seclusion, my disciple perished during a tribulation. Her soul dissipated between heaven and earth, never to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Because she was originally an anomaly, she did not exist between heaven and earth. I originally thought that she would continue to drift between heaven and earth until the last strand of her soul dissipated between heaven and earth. Unexpectedly, because you were an anomaly, and because of her good fortune, she obtained a strand of life and entered the cycle of reincarnation to become your daughter. When I found out about this, I tried to find a suitable body in this lower realm and used that as a means to find her. Hearing this, Fingzhou was slightly startled. You said that my daughter was your disciple in her previous life. Her face was filled with obvious doubt. How could that be? The man glanced at her and slowly said, she is my disciple, whether you believe it or not. I don't need to lie to you in order to take her away. Fingzhou looked at him, her gaze landing on his eyes. She saw that there was a slight annoyance in his eyes, as if he was unhappy, but there was no fear or panic in his eyes, only seriousness and serenity. She fell silent, and after a while, she asked, if you take her away, can you protect her and let her grow up safely? Can you ensure that nothing happens to her again? You don't need to worry about this, I have the ability to protect her. The man slowly said. Even if those so-called almighty people want to take her life, can you protect her? Fingzhou asked again, looking straight into his eyes. Before she grows up, I will not let those old fellows know that she is your daughter. If they find out one day, I will do everything I can to protect her. His voice was neither fast nor slow, but it was filled with determination. He looked straight at Fingzhou, not avoiding her gaze. Seeing this, Fingzhou said, all right, I agree to let you take her away, but not now. She looked at him and said, she has just returned to my side, and the blood curse on her body has not been completely removed. At least for now, I cannot let you take her away. I can only stay here for half a year. After half a year, I'll have to go back. As for the blood curse on the little girl, I'll bring her back and help her remove it, he said. When she heard that she only had half a year, Fingzhou pursed her lips. When she heard that he had a way to break the blood curse, she said, I understand. She stood up and paused. She looked at him and asked, who are you? Not yet. It's best if you don't know. He shook his head and stood up. He put on his mask and said, there's no benefit in saying it. You just need to know that I won't harm your daughter. If you're worried that you won't be able to see her in the future, you can rest assured that you'll have the chance to see her after you ascend. Hearing him talk about ascension, Fingzhou's eyes flashed and his heart stirred. He said, since you have a way to bring her up, then bring my son up as well. They are twins and have a good relationship. Shen-er will accompany her up there, so she won't be lonely. Hearing this, the man glanced at Fingzhou with his hands behind his back. You have a good plan. Don't tell me you want to give me your eldest son as well. He said this casually, but who knew that she would laugh? Chapter 46-34. Do you think it's easy to casually bring a person up? He lightly snorted and coldly looked at her. Seeing this, Fingzhou smiled and said, aren't you an almighty from above? Other people can't come down, but you can think of a way to come down. It can be seen that you are more powerful than others. Moreover, bringing one is also bringing two is also bringing, so it shouldn't be a problem for you. He didn't speak, only waved his hand, dispelling the enchantment in the air. At the same time, He raised his hand and waved, pushing Fengjiu out of the courtyard. Fengjiu slowly came back to her senses, and light flashed in her eyes. Looking towards the courtyard again, she saw that the enchantment had already been set up. Surging airflow filled the air above the enchantment. Gradually she couldn't see the scenery inside the courtyard. If before she still had doubts, then this person's push actually dispelled the doubts in her heart. Being able to push her this kind of strength out of the courtyard like a feather, this wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Thinking of this, she also didn't stay here for long, rather turned around and left. Today, although she didn't ask what almighty he was from above, but she also knew his origin. She also knew that his current body wasn't his real body. As for other things, she still had half a year's time, so she could slowly observe. If this person was worthy to be entrusted to her 3 children, then she would start to arrange things. As for the enemy, as long as she knew what kind of person the enemy was, what kind of existence he was, then she would have a target. In the following 2 days, Fengjiu accompanied the 3 children to have a good rest. He took them to stroll around the city, and again went to Peach Blossom Cove to stay for a day. Until the 3rd day, Wanyan Qianhua and others also rushed back one after another. Along with Guan Shilin, Du Fan, Ling Hua, Ling Shuang and others waiting, the residents also became more and more lively. This day, after the banquet, Wanyan Qianhua pulled Fengjiu to a corner and asked, "Who is that person wearing a mask? Why do I feel that person is somewhat strange?" Fengjiu looked towards that masked man who was helping you, to get food, and said with a smile, "Didn't I say before? He is the benefactor of our 3 children, and he wants to accept you, as his disciple. I also have plans to let you, acknowledge him as her master. You're capable enough. Are you afraid that you can't teach 3 children? You, is still so young. Are you willing to let her leave with a person who came out of nowhere?" Wanyan Qianhua said disapprovingly, "Besides, this person looks weird to me, and I can't see through his cultivation. Are you relieved? Sister, let's talk about this matter later. Today, let's have a good gathering. I plan to bring the 3 children to Xuanwu Lord's place tomorrow to let Hao meet his parents." When the 3 children were wandering in the mortal world, they still owe some kindness, and I still want to bring them to repay it. Fengjiu said and sighed lightly, "You also know that I don't know what's going on with Mose now. I also don't know where he is. Until now, I also don't know how to tell the 3 children. Also, I have to make a trip to Tianshan. I reckon that I won't be staying at home for too long." Chapter 46-35. Fengjiu nodded. "I know," she said as she held her hand and walked back to the banquet. The next day, after Fengjiu informed her family, she brought the 3 children, the masked man, Ling Hua, Ling Shuang, and Du Fan to the palace of the Black Tortoise Monarch. On the spaceship, Hao couldn't help but ask, "Mother, 17 went to the Phoenix Guard training camp. When we go to the mortal world again, should we bring him along?" Ever since they came back and found out that 17 was loyal and devoted to them, their mother arranged for 17 to enter the Phoenix Guard training camp. It had been a few days and they hadn't seen him, so they didn't know what his current situation was. Fengjiu sat at the bow of the spaceship, drinking wine and chatting with the masked man. After hearing Hao-er's words, she asked with a smile, "Do you want to bring him along?" Hao nodded. "I want to bring him back to have a look. After all, he lived there for so many years, and the people he is familiar with are there. If we go back, let's bring him back." "Okay, then after meeting your parents, we'll bring him to the mortal world together," Fengjiu said. Mother, Yu also has very good friends in the Pan family." Yu leaned in her embrace and said in a soft and excited voice, "There's Sister Shua, and Dachi leaned in Fingzhou's embrace and told her the interesting things between her and the young masters and young ladies of the Pan family. The spaceship flew in the air. Du Fan, Ling Hua, and Ling Shuang were either standing, sitting, or leaning against the side of the spaceship. They listened to Yu Er's soft and excited voice as she talked about interesting things. Unknowingly, they felt that time flew by quickly. In the Black Tortoise Palace, the Black Tortoise monarch, who had already received the news from Fingzhou, was already waiting in the palace. Seeing that his wife hadn't arrived yet, he said to the people beside him, "Go and see why Madam and young master haven't arrived yet." "We're here." Madam Black Tortoise led her youngest son in and looked at Monarch Black Tortoise. She said unhappily, "They aren't here yet. Is there a need for you to rush them 3 times?" As she spoke, she led her son forward and sat down beside her. Then, she placed her son on her lap. "Madam, Fingzhou sent Hao back today. They finally found the child and personally sent Hao back. As the host and Hao Er's biological parents, we naturally can't be rude." Monarch Black Tortoise said and reached out to hold her hand. They were the ones who lost the child, so it's normal for them to find it. Besides, Hao Er has always been thinking about Fingzhou and Xianyuan Mo's in his heart. He has always called them father and mother. People who don't know would think that they are his biological parents. She seemed to be a little resentful. She felt that it was unfair, and when she spoke, she was also angry. Hearing this, Monarch Black Tortoise said, "Why are you saying this? Don't you know that Hao Er has been wandering outside since he was young? They were the ones who saved him and raised him until he was 5 or 6 years old. It's normal for him to be estranged from us. After all, the child has always been living with them, and they are indeed good to Hao Er." Chapter 46-36. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. It's useless to talk too much. Monarch Xuanwu gestured for her to stop complaining. After a while, a guard came in and reported, "Monarch, the spaceship has landed outside the hall." Monarch Xuanwu hurriedly stood up and said to his wife, "They're here. Let's go and welcome them." Seeing this, Madame Xuanwu stood up with her son in her arms. The smile on her face was faint and she didn't say anything. She quietly followed him out. The spaceship stopped and Fingzhou and the others alighted. Yu Er, who had come to a new place, was particularly excited. Especially after knowing that this was the palace where her elder brother's biological parents lived, she was pleasantly surprised. Elder brother, this place is so big and beautiful." Hao Er revealed a faint smile and looked at her. "Elder brother will bring you around in a while." "Okay." The 2 little fellows responded and saw a group of people walking in. The leader was a couple carrying a child. The child looked younger than them by a few months. "Ghost Doctor, you're finally here." Monarch Xuanwu walked towards Fingzhou and bowed to her. His smiling gaze landed on Hao Er. His eyes were filled with gratification and emotion. "Hao Er, it's good that you're back safely. We can rest assured. Hao Er, come over and let mother take a look." Madame Xuanwu put her son down and opened her arms. Hao Er took a step forward and bowed respectfully to them. "This child greets father and mother." After bowing, he walked forward and stood in front of his biological mother. "Son, you must have suffered a lot outside. Mother told you not to go out and just stay at home, but you didn't listen and insisted on going out. Look, you suffered so much outside. Fortunately, you came back safely. Otherwise..." Madame Black Tortoise held his hand and kept talking. When Monarch Black Tortoise heard this, he felt a little awkward and hurriedly interrupted her. All right. Hao Er is back. Why are you still talking about this? The Black Tortoise monarch scolded and then said to Fingzhou apologetically, Ghost Doctor, please don't take offense. She doesn't mean anything else. She's just worried about her son. Fingzhou smiled and did not take this matter to heart. He only said, it's fine. This time, I sent Hao back and brought 2 little ones. I'm afraid I'll have to disturb Monarch Black Tortoise here for a few days. Ha 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 ha, Ghost Doctor, what are you saying? You're more than welcome to stay here for a while. Moreover, the children are of similar age and can play together. Oh right, you haven't met my youngest son yet, right? Lord Black Tortoise smiled as he looked at his youngest son beside him. His eyes were filled with love. Fengzhou looked at that child. He seemed to be about the same age as you and the others. However, if one were to look carefully, he reckoned that he would be a few months younger. His appearance was also very outstanding. His appearance was more like Madame Xuanwu. At this time, the little boy held Madame Xuanwu's hand with one hand and placed the other in his mouth. A pair of curious eyes stared at Mu Qin and Mu Yu, as if wondering why they looked exactly the same. Fingzhou smiled and said, Du Fan came over last time. I also heard him mention that the little master is very intelligent. Today, his appearance is also very outstanding. Chapter 46-37. The group entered the main hall and chatted for a while. After drinking 2 cups of tea, the Black Tortoise Sovereign said, I've already asked someone to prepare a courtyard for you to rest in. You can stay here for a few more days so that the children can get together and have some fun. As the Black Tortoise Sovereign spoke, he looked at Fingzhou and smiled. Ghost Doctor, it's rare for you to come here. I happen to have something to discuss with you. Why don't you come with me to the study? Seeing this, Fingzhou said, Sure. Madam, take the children around and let them have some fun. We haven't been so lively here for a long time, he said to his wife. I will. Madame Xuanwu replied. She held her youngest son's hand and said to Hao, Mu Qin, and Mu Yu, let's go to the garden for a walk. We'll go back and rest when we're tired. I've already instructed the kitchen to make some things that the children like to eat. I'll have them send it to the garden later. Go. Fengzhou gestured for the children to follow her. Du Fan also stood up with a smile. I came here once last time, but I didn't take a closer look at the strange flowers and herbs in the garden. This time, I must take a good look. I'll take you there. This way, please. Madame Xuanwu said with a smile. She made a gesture of invitation and led them out. After they left, the Black Tortoise Sovereign also stood up and made a gesture of invitation to Fingzhou. Ghost Doctor, please. Fingzhou nodded and followed him to the study. This time, the main reason she came back was to send Hao back to meet them. Moreover, if they agreed, she also wanted to entrust Hao to the masked man and take him away. When they went up, she would find an immortal sect or an expert for Hao to cultivate. However, she did not know if they would agree. She also did not know if this idea of hers was too selfish. Therefore, she wanted to take advantage of the few days she stayed here to observe the Black Tortoise Sovereign and his wife's attitude towards Hao. Would they be willing to let him leave? On the other side, Madame Xuanwu brought everyone to the garden and introduced them. The flowers in this garden are all strange flowers and herbs collected from all over the world. They are not only for ornamental purposes, but most of them can also be used as medicinal herbs. Medicinal herbs. Yu has never seen such a beautiful flower or medicinal herb before. Yu's soft voice carried surprise, and her little face overflowed with joy as she said, but now Yu is learning medicinal herbs, Hereafter I will know many medicinal herbs, and will also know what these medicinal herbs' flowers can be used for. You is really amazing. In the future, you will definitely be like Mother, a very amazing alchemist and pharmacist. Hao looked at her and said, a gentle smile appearing on his cold little face. Hearing this, Madame Black Tortoise glanced at him. Seeing the gentle expression on his face and hearing him call her mother, the smile on her face couldn't help but fade. In the end, to him, his mother would always be that Fengzhou, and she, his biological mother, could only be called a distant mother by him. The little boy who was being held by Black Tortoise Madam looked at his elder brother, then looked at you. He blinked his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking, but he didn't speak. Chapter 46-38. The little boy, who was being held by Madame Xuanwu, saw his brother being led away by a lady who was about the same age as him. She was clearly his brother, but she called him Big Brother. For a moment, he couldn't help but bite his fingers, his little face full of grievance. Seeing that they were far away and no one asked him to go with them, he shook off his mother's hand and trotted forward to chase after them. Madame Xuanwu was startled and hurriedly said, "Run slower, don't fall." Hao heard the sound behind him and looked back. Seeing that it was his younger brother, he slowed down to wait for him. You let go of Hao and Mu Chen's hands and trotted forward to squat at the side to look at the flowers. The little boy trotted to Hao's side and reached out to hug his arm. His pair of eyes stared at Mu Chin and Mu Yu as if to tell them that this was his older brother. Mu Chin acted like a little adult and ignored him. Yu was looking at the flowers and didn't look at him. Hao saw his younger brother hugging his arm and didn't say anything. Seeing that Yu kept looking at the flowers, he asked, Yu which flower do you want? Big brother will pick it for you. Yu turned her head and looked at him with a beaming smile, then said in a crisp voice, Big brother, plucked flowers will die very quickly, and will not be beautiful. Like this, if we let them grow, we can always see them. Yu is a good child, Yu will not pluck flowers. Hearing this, Hao's expression softened and said, Then let's go sit in the pavilion for a while. Let the servant send some food over. Okay. She responded and came to his side. Seeing the little boy hugging her big brother's arm tightly and staring at her with a pair of small tiger-like eyes, she couldn't help but blink her beautiful big eyes and said with a smile, Are you big brother's younger brother? What's your name? I'm Xianyuan Miue, you have to call me Sister Yu. Go away. The little boy reached out and pushed Yu. Caught off guard, Yu was pushed back a few steps. She staggered and fell to the ground. What are you doing? Hao's face turned cold and he coldly glanced at his younger brother beside him. Then, he broke free from his brother's grip on his arm and quickly went forward to help Yu up. At the same time, he helped her clean the dust on her skirt. Yu are you alright? I'm fine. It's just that my skirt is dirty. Yu looked at her pink and tender little skirt which was dirtied because she had fallen and sat on the ground, and the smile on her little face also disappeared. Mu Chen had always been a man of action. He was the kind of person who would not speak if he could, and went straight to the point. Seeing that the little boy was bullying his little sister, he immediately took a step forward and pushed him with all his might, causing him to fall to the ground. Wow! The little boy was used to being spoiled. At this time, after being yelled at by Hao and pushed by Mu Chin, he fell to the ground and immediately sat on the ground, crying loudly. On the other side, Madame Black Tortoise, who was chatting with Du Fan and the others, heard her son crying. Her expression changed and she quickly walked over. Seeing her youngest son sitting on the ground and crying sadly, she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. She hurriedly went forward and picked him up. "What's wrong? Why are you sitting on the ground and crying?" Sob, sob, sob. "Big brother scolded me, they bullied me." Sob, sob, sob. The little boy cried sadly and complained. Chapter 46-39. She patted the mud and sand off her youngest son's clothes and coaxed him softly. She didn't look at How, and the others. After she picked up her youngest son, she turned to Dufan and the others and said, "I'm really sorry, I have to leave first. You guys go walk around first. I'll take the child back to change his clothes first. Look at how dirty his clothes are from the fall." Seeing this, Dufan smiled warmly and said, "Madam, go ahead and do your work first. We'll walk around casually." Seeing that she left with her youngest son without saying anything to How, Dufan couldn't help but turn back and look at How, Mu Chin, and Mu Yu. "You, do you want to change your dress?" Dufan asked warmly, his gaze falling on the little one. "No need, big brother helped me clean it. I still want to play around. If I change it later, it'll get dirty again." Yuda said crisply and looked at her big brother, who was looking down, and her big brother, who was pursing his lips and not speaking. After thinking for a while, Yuda explained, "Uncle Dufan, we didn't bully big brother's little brother. He pushed me first, so big brother pushed him. We didn't hit him." There was a trace of anxiety in her soft voice, as if she was afraid that they wouldn't believe her. Hearing this, the masked man standing at the side smiled slightly. They were all immortal cultivators. Even if these children were on the other side of the flower bush, they had all noticed the movement and situation on this side. Naturally, they knew what was going on. Not to mention how, Mu Chen and Mu Yu looked young, but they had experienced a lot of danger and difficulties. They had also wandered alone outside. The little boy raised in this palace couldn't be compared to them. If they really fought, not to mention Mu Chin, even you, could defeat the little boy with one hand. "We know, don't worry. It's okay, Madame Xuanwu won't blame you." Dufan comforted them. In fact, all of them understood that although Madame Black Tortoise did not say anything, there was definitely a trace of anger in her heart. Otherwise, she would not have directly carried the little boy and left without saying a word to How, When they thought of this, Dufan, Ling Hua, and Ling Shuang looked at each other and simultaneously looked towards How, who had lowered his eyes. They also felt bad when they saw him like this. Thus, Ling Hua walked forward and rubbed How-er's head. He said, "How-er, you're familiar with this place. Why don't you show us around?" Hearing this, How-er looked up at them and nodded. "Okay." After walking around the palace, they returned to the courtyard to rest. After everyone had some food in the courtyard, How-er did not stay with Mu Chin and Mu Yu because he had his own courtyard here. Instead, he returned to his own courtyard. Ling Shuang helped Mu Yu take a bath and change her clothes before walking out. She saw that her mother had not returned yet, but other than her eldest brother, the others were sitting in the courtyard and drinking tea. Thus, she jogged forward to the table. Just as she was about to climb up and sit down, the person beside her picked her up and placed her firmly on the stool. She tilted her head to look and revealed a sweet smile. "Thank you, uncle." The masked man glanced at her. "It's master." Hee hee. Chapter 46-40. Hearing this, Dufan was a little surprised by Yu's sharpness, but thinking that her master's children had always been intelligent, she just smiled and warmly said, "No, don't think too much. Your big brother won't be angry with you. Hearing these words, Yu blinked her eyes, but didn't say anything more. She only replied with an "n" sound, then lying on the table, her small chin rested on the back of her hand, waiting for her mother to return. When Fengjiu came back, she saw that everyone was still sitting around the table in the courtyard. She asked, "Have you all eaten? Why didn't you rest first?" "We ate some snacks and the like, but we haven't eaten dinner yet. We were planning to wait for Master to come back," Leng Hua said. Seeing this, Fengjiu said to Leng Hua, "Let the servants serve the food. Just put it in this courtyard and eat. Go inside and bring out 2 tables to put together." While speaking, she glanced around and saw that everyone was here except for Hao. She asked, "Where is Hao? Is he going to Madame Xuanwa's place for dinner?" "Mother, when we were walking in the garden earlier, I pushed Big Brother's younger brother down." Mu Chen stood up and said. Hearing this, Fengjiu raised an eyebrow and squatted down to look at him. She asked softly, "Then tell Mother, why did you push him down?" Mother, it was Big Brother's younger brother who pushed you first, so Big Brother pushed him." Yu hurriedly got down from the stool and stood beside her brother, worried that her mother would blame her brother. Fengjiu rubbed the 2 little guys' heads and smiled. It's right for a brother to protect his little sister. However, we are guests at someone's house, so we can't go overboard. If it's a small matter, just bear with it a little and don't argue with him. If you argue with him over everything, in the end, you'll only cause trouble for yourself. Yes, we understand. The 2 little guys agreed in unison, firmly remembering their mother's teachings. That little boy is your big brother's biological younger brother. He's younger than you and not as sensible as you. You pushed him down. Tell me, who should your big brother help? Are you making things difficult for him? Fengjiu said softly, looking into the eyes of the 2 children. The 2 little guys couldn't help but look at each other. Mu Chen asked, "Mother, what should we do?" Fengjiu smiled and said, "Didn't you bring gifts for your elder brother's younger brother? Nyangqin will accompany you to give him a gift and apologize to him. But Mother just said that Big Brother protecting little sister is something he ought to do, so why should we go and apologize?" Yu asked in puzzlement. Fengjiu smiled and pinched her tender little face, saying, "We're going to apologize not because we're saying that you're wrong, but because we're being polite. Moreover, this is a very small matter, isn't it?" The 2 of them thought about it and finally agreed, "All right then. We will listen to Mother." Fengjiu stood up and said to the people in the courtyard, "You all eat first. Don't wait for us, I'll take them over. Since you said it's a small matter, why let them make this trip? Moreover, they should be the ones apologizing," the masked man said calmly. Fengjiu looked at him, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and said with a smile, "I'm just teaching the children how to deal with people. If they can solve things with their brains, why should they use their hands?" Chapter 46-41. Fengjiu brought them along and asked the servants where Hao's courtyard was. She planned to go and see him first. On the way, she looked at the 2 children beside her and asked softly with a smile, "Mother is bringing you to apologize. Will you be unhappy?" "No." The 2 shook their heads and said seriously, "Mother is definitely doing this for our own good." Fengjiu smiled and looked at the 2 children with doting eyes. She said softly, "You still have a lot to learn. In the future, I may not be able to stay by your side and teach you, so you have to rely on yourself for many things. You have to remember that no matter how outstanding your talent is, no matter how strong your strength is, you can't let yourself become an arrogant person. Before you grow up, it's easy to be in the limelight and be killed by others. You have to learn to protect yourself and know how to restrain your edge. When you encounter something, don't attack without saying a word. Think about the consequences of everything, use your brain, endure when you can, and it's not too late to attack when you can't. The two children looked up at her and finally nodded seriously. Yes, yes, we know. Mu-chan thought in his heart that next time, he would listen to his mother. If others provoked him, he would treat them as invisible. If he really couldn't bear it, he would send them flying with a kick. Clean and tidy. Yu-er thought that since her mother said to use her brain more, then when she didn't make a move, she would get some medicine to deal with the people she hated. She would make them suffer and perhaps they wouldn't know it was her who did it. Thinking of this, the two children showed an inexplicable smile tacitly. When they came to Hao-er's courtyard, they heard the servant say that the eldest young master was called by Madame Xuanwu. So, they went to the main courtyard. At this time, in the main courtyard, the little boy with red eyes was lying in his mother's arms, and Monarch Xuanwu was sitting beside him. When he saw Hao-er come in, he said, "Hao-er is here. Sit down. Our family hasn't eaten together for a long time. Let's have a good meal today." Hao-er answered and sat down at the table. After thinking for a while, he said, "Mother, Chen-er didn't mean to push my younger brother. He was just protecting you." Hearing this, Madame Xuanwu looked at him indifferently. "Hao-er, you are our child and Bo-er's brother. Why don't you protect your brother but the two of them? Speaking up for them. Do you know whose child you are? Do you know who your real family is?" Hao-er pursed his lips, lowered his gaze, and didn't say anything. All right, what's the point of saying all this? It's not easy for the child to come back. Can't you let him have a good meal with us? What's the point of being so calculative?" Monarch Black Tortoise said as he looked at his wife disapprovingly. She comforted her eldest son, "Hao-er, your mother is like that. Don't take her words to heart." Chapter 46-42. Hearing this, the Black Tortoise monarch could not help but have a headache. How can this be the same? You also know that if the ghost doctor had not saved our son back then, he would be long gone now. The child is still young. Tell me, as a mother, how can you say such things? If I had known that he had returned and did not treat us as his parents in his heart, I would have preferred that he had died outside back then. Lady Black Tortoise knew that she had misspoken and could not help but fall silent. She looked at Hao-er with a guilty conscience. When she saw that his face had turned pale, she faintly regretted it. Impulse was the devil. No matter what, he was still the son she had carried for 10 months. She should not have treated him like this. Just as she was about to say something, she heard Fengjiu's cold voice. "In that case, Lady Black Tortoise, just pretend that you don't have a son like him." Fengjiu brought Mu-chin and Mu-yu in. The two little guys had obviously heard the previous words and their little faces were full of anger at this moment. "Big brother! Big brother!" The two trotted forward and came to Hao-er's side. One of them held his hand and then glared at Lady Black Tortoise like little beasts. "Ghost Doctor, it's a misunderstanding. This is all a misunderstanding. My wife did not mean it." Her words were said in an impulse. "You can't take it seriously." When the Black Tortoise monarch saw Fengjiu arrive, he quickly stood up to smooth things over. However, when he saw her cold expression, he could not help but feel a little embarrassed. Fengjiu ignored him and slowly walked forward to Hao-er's side. He reached out and rubbed his head. He said softly, "It's okay. Hao-er still has us." Hearing these gentle words and feeling the warmth from the palm on his head, Hao-er's heart ached. He felt wronged and sad. He held back his tears and raised his head to look at the person beside him. With a helpless voice, he called out, "Mother." Fengjiu patted his shoulder and turned to look coldly at Madame Xuanwu. "Hao Er was raised by me. In my heart, he is like my own child. He has always been my treasure. I can't bear to let him suffer any grievances. I didn't expect that you would make him suffer. Since Madame doesn't want him, I will take him away. In the future, Madame, don't say that he is your son. In my opinion, you are not worthy of being his mother." Madame Xuanwu's face turned green and white at Fengjiu's words. She wanted to speak several times, but she wasn't someone like Fengjiu. She didn't even have the courage to speak when she was stared at coldly. "Ghost Doctor, please calm down, Ghost Doctor." Monarch Black Tortoise said, "My wife didn't mean it that way." Fengjiu looked at him and said, "Monarch Black Tortoise, since we are talking about this today, let's make this matter clear. Back then, when I sent Hao Er back to you, how did you and your wife promise me that you would love him and not let him suffer any grievances? In the end, since you can't love him, tolerate him, and love him like a parent should, I will take him away today. You don't have to say anything more. In the future, when he grows up, if he is willing to come back to see you, he can come back. I will not bring him back to be bullied and wronged here." Chapter 46-43. Didn't you just say that you wished he had died outside back then? Why? Now you're saying that he's your son. Fengjiu glanced at her mockingly and did not look at her green and red face. He continued, "As for why you should take him away. Ha! Haven't you heard of the saying, raising kindness is not as great as giving birth to kindness? Putting aside the fact that he was raised by me, I saved him from the beasts back then and gave him a new life. Just based on this, I have the right to take him away." She glanced at the Black Tortoise monarch and said coldly, "If you, as his biological parents, truly love him, I'm naturally willing for him to have another pair of loving parents. However, since you can't truly love him, then don't use your status as his biological parents to restrain him. Let him suffer." She was protective, especially towards her own children. If the Black Tortoise monarch and his wife truly loved Hao Er, even if she could not bear to part with the son she raised, she would still send him back to his biological parents' side and let them live together and get along well. However, she would never allow the child she regarded as a treasure in her hands to be bullied and wronged by his biological parents. When the Black Tortoise monarch and his wife heard her words, their faces alternated between green and white. For a long time, they could not find a word to refute. In fact, they themselves knew that perhaps they did not lack Hao Er's food and daily necessities. However, in terms of love, perhaps when they first brought him back, they would have been more attentive and wanted to give him all the good things. They also wanted to do their best to love and pamper him. However, Hao Er was cold by nature. No matter how well they treated him, it seemed that they could not enter his heart. Later on, when they had their youngest son, they placed more of their attention and love on him. Gradually, it seemed that they drifted further and further away and became more and more distant. At this moment, Fengjiu's words were sharp and direct. They pierced through the layer of membrane that they had all along, making them embarrassed and guilty at the same time. Because those words were all true. Hao Er, come with mother. Fengjiu did not look at them and spoke to Hao Er instead. Hao Er did not speak. He stood up quietly and walked out beside Fengjiu. Hao Er. Monarch Black Tortoise called out with guilt in his eyes. Hao Er's footsteps only paused for a moment. He didn't even turn his head as he silently followed Fengjiu and left. He didn't even look at them again. Mu Chen and Mu Yu followed closely behind, holding their big brother's hand. In the past, they didn't know that their big brother's biological parents didn't treat him well. Now that they knew, they were very angry and secretly told themselves that they must treat their big brother better in the future. Seeing them leave, Madame Black Tortoise's face turned pale. She sat at the table without saying a word. It was unknown if she regretted it or felt guilty. The Black Tortoise monarch sighed softly. He glanced at his wife and said, "Look, are you happy now that things have turned out like this?" He shook his head and was no longer in the mood to eat. He put his hands behind his back and walked out. The little boy in Madame Black Tortoise's arms was still in a daze. He didn't know what had happened. He only knew that his brother seemed to have left again and might not return in the future. Chapter 46-44. Hearing this, Madame Xuanwu's face turned pale. She didn't say anything and just hugged her son tightly. She closed her eyes with some guilt. On the other side, after Fengjiu returned to the small courtyard, he didn't stay here for long. Instead, he said to them, "Let's go." After speaking, he turned and walked outside. Everyone in the courtyard was startled. They looked at each other and quickly followed. They followed Fengjiu out of the palace. After arriving outside, Fengjiu took out the spaceship. At this time, Monarch Xuanwu hurried over. Ghost Doctor, wait, wait." Monarch Xuanwu rushed over. Seeing that she was preparing to leave with the people, he couldn't help but say, "Ghost Doctor, you just arrived. Why are you leaving?" After speaking, he turned to Hao, who was beside Fengjiu and said, "Hao, persuade your mother. Moreover, you just returned home." Hao looked at him and then past him. His gaze landed on the people who were carrying the children. He said word by word with a cold voice, "I won't come again in the future. Just treat it as if I died back then. I won't have a father and mother anymore. I only have a father and mother. I won't have any relationship with you." After speaking, he turned and boarded the spaceship, no longer looking at them. Seeing Hao, who had been silent all the way saying these words, Fengjiu glanced at Monarch Xuanwu and Madame Xuanwu behind him and said, "Goodbye." She turned and also boarded the spaceship with the two little ones. Du Fan and others boarded the spaceship one after another. After the spaceship took off and left, Du Fan saw that Hao had returned to the cabin to rest. Only then did he go forward and ask, "Master, what happened?" At this time, Yu was still panting with anger. Hearing Du Fan's words, she said, "They bullied Big Brother." Fengjiu rubbed his daughter's head and said slowly, "When I took the two little guys to their courtyard, I heard Madame Xuanwu scolding Hao. Those maidservants who were about to go into report had their acupoint sealed by me. We listened outside for a while. When we saw them, we went overboard. In the end, they even said that they would rather Hao die outside and not come back." A trace of coldness flashed through her eyes, and her voice also became colder. After hearing this, I couldn't help but bring the two children into reason with them. Since they didn't care about Hao, I told them that Hao would be mine in the future, and I wouldn't bring him back to see them. Hearing this, Du Fan sighed softly. I didn't expect Madame Xuanwu to be so overbearing. But this is good too. At least we don't have to let Hao come back in the future. As early as the last time when Master asked him to come over to check how Hao had been living here for the past few years, he knew that if Master came personally, he would definitely fall out with them. Sure enough, it was. It's not early today. Pay attention below. When we see a town, we will go down and rest for the night. Moreover, the children haven't eaten yet. We have to make some food for them. Fengjiu instructed. Master, don't worry. I will pay attention. Du Fan said. Seeing that she walked into the cabin, he walked to the side and sat down. He released his divine sense and paid attention to whether there were towns below where the spaceship flew past. Chapter 46-45. How, Mother will come in to talk with you. Fengjiu said outside the door. Hearing the voice coming from outside, How, got up and went forward to open the door. Mother. He threw himself into his mother's bosom, his voice carrying a trace of choking. Fengjiu hugged him, lightly patted his back, and softly said, "It's okay, Mother will accompany you." She led him to the bedside and sat down, softly saying, "How, you must know, in this world, there is no one who will always accompany you. On the road of growth, you will encounter many things, you need to learn to face them by yourself and adapt." Fengjiu accompanied Hao in the cabin while enlightening him. And outside, after Du Fan saw a town below, he came to the cabin and called, "Master, there is a town below." Fengjiu led Hao out and said, "Then let's go down and rest." After saying this, she controlled the airship to fly down. After reaching the bottom, she put away the airship, and the group of people went to the town. Seeing the town was bustling with noise and bustling, children playing on the street, and lanterns hanging in front of shops on both sides of the street, bright red formed a beautiful scenery, Fengjiu said to Du Fan, "You go and find an inn first. I will take the children to stroll around the town." Finished speaking, she looked at that masked man and said, "You also go and rest first. You don't need to follow us around." The masked man glanced at you, nodded his head, and faintly replied, "N." Finished speaking, he turned around and went to find an inn first. Then Master, don't be too late, I will go and find an inn first, in a while I will use my communication jade to inform you. After saying this, Du Fan saluted, and left with that masked man, leaving behind Lang Hua and Lang Shuang to follow beside Fengjiu and others. "Let's go, Mother will show you around. If you want to eat something, just tell Mother and Mother will buy it for you," Fengjiu said with a smile as she led them forward. Lang Hua and Lang Shuang looked at each other and smiled. They quietly followed behind them to help look after the three children. Compared to the food in the restaurant, the three children preferred the street snacks. Fengjiu took them to try the dishes one by one and brought them to buy some small toys. Along the way, Hao-er's mood gradually improved. "Are you tired? Do you want to go back and rest?" Fengjiu asked, looking at the three excited children. Mother, I heard the people over there say that they are going to the river to release wishing lanterns. Mother, let's also go." Yu pulled her hand and lightly swayed it, looking at her with a spoiled appearance. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled and replied helplessly, Okay. Mother will accompany you. Let's go. Let's go and buy wishing lanterns first." They walked to the front of the small stall, and after buying several wishing lanterns, they followed the person holding the wishing lanterns until they arrived at the river bank where many wishing lanterns were floating. In the river, on the water surface, those wishing lanterns were like lotus flowers in full bloom emitting soft light. They floated on the water surface and floated along with the slowly flowing water, which was very beautiful. The three children took the wishing lanterns to the river bank, and after silently making a wish in their heart, they put the wishing lanterns into the river and watched it slowly float. Chapter 46-46. Okay, let's go back and rest. Fengjiu bent down and picked her up. She smiled and looked at Hao and Mu Qin, who were walking over. "Let's go to the inn to rest." The two children agreed and followed her to the inn. At noon the next day, the group of them left on the flying ship. They first returned to the Feng ancestral home and brought 17 to the Pan family's mortal world. 1 month later, the 3 children came to the mortal world again. However, the difference was that last time they were stranded here and couldn't go back. This time, their mother and other people accompanied them. Fengjiu also had the intention of taking them on a scenic tour. She took Hao to relax and let Mu Qin and Mu Yu have some fun. Along the way, she also took this opportunity to teach them some things. Yu liked medicine, so she taught her. Although she was young, she learned things very quickly. In less than a month, she already knew how to make some simple medicine by herself. In terms of cultivation, she also taught Hao and Mu Qin. The two often learned from each other, and Mu Chen's improvement was also very fast. On the other hand, Hao became less and less talkative. Although he tried his best to appear normal, she knew that his biological mother's words were like a sharp knife that cut through his young heart, leaving a mark. It wasn't so easy to erase it. Since they had arrived at the mortal realm, they did not use a flying ship. They would only fly on their flying swords occasionally and rest from time to time. Even though they were walking leisurely, they still arrived at the imperial city in the evening. "Mother, we're here," Yu said excitedly. "I can go see brother Fu Qing and sister Shui." Mu Qin also showed a rare smile. Although he didn't say anything, he was still very happy to be able to see the little fellow of the past. "Mother, the Pan family's residence is in front." Hao pointed and said. As they entered the city, the stunned and surprised gazes of the people in the city followed them closely. After all, the aura of immortal cultivators was incomparable to that of mortals. In addition, they were all very outstanding. When they walked in, they naturally attracted the attention and curiosity of the people. "Hey, look, aren't those twins the ones who lived in the Pan family?" Someone recognized Mu Qin and Mu Yu. After all, these two children's exquisite and identical faces were hard to forget. "That's a celestial child." The fairy child had returned. "Look at the people around them, all of them are so good-looking. They must be immortals. Immortals have come to our imperial city. Immortals have come to our imperial city." As the surprised cheers of one of the citizens spread out, those voices spread out one after another. They were also densely surrounded, but no one blocked the path ahead. As they walked forward, the surrounding citizens naturally opened up a path for them. There were even people who ran to the Pan family to inform them of the good news. Pan Ning was sitting in the courtyard, drinking tea and reading a book. His son, Fu Qing, was practicing martial arts in the courtyard. Suddenly, he saw the housekeeper rush in with a surprised expression. He put down his teacup and asked, "What's wrong?" Chapter 46-47. Mu Qin and little sister Yu are back. Fu Qing's eyes lit up when he heard that. He immediately ran out and shouted, "That's great, that's great. Mu Qin and little sister Yu are back." Pan Ning was also startled. He quickly stood up and asked anxiously, "You said they're back. Did someone accompany them back?" "Yes, someone accompanied them back. They should be at the gate soon." The butler smiled. "Have you informed the old master and the others?" Pan Ning asked as he walked out quickly. The butler followed behind and said, "Yes, old master and the rest are already in the front yard." "Then what are you waiting for? Quickly open the door. We'll go out and welcome them." Pan Ning said and quickly walked forward. When Pan Ning arrived at the front yard, his brother, sister-in-law, old master, a few children, and his wife were already waiting there. He quickly walked forward and said, "Grandfather, I heard that Hao and the rest are back. Not long ago, that person who claimed to be their uncle left. Now, I heard that the children are back. They should have returned to their parents' side. Old Master said, let's go out and welcome them. Our Pan family is greatly indebted to them. Thus, the group followed Old Master and waited in front of the Pan family's gate. From afar, they saw a group of people surrounded by the city's citizens slowly walking over. When they saw the group of people, even they couldn't help but be shocked and surprised. It was because the group of people walking over, regardless of whether they were men or women, were good-looking. Moreover, they were the kind of people who were stunning. What made them feel the most awestruck was their aura. That kind of elegant immortal aura, as well as the noble aura on them, made people involuntarily feel awe and respect, not daring to be presumptuous. Big Brother Fu Qing. Big Brother Bowen. Big Sister Shui, we're back. Yu saw them from afar and hurriedly waved her little hand and shouted as she ran forward. Little Sister Yu, Fu Qing waved his hand with a face full of excitement. Bowen and Shui, who were standing beside Pan Hong, saw them and smiled happily. Their eyes lit up as they looked at their little friend whom they hadn't seen in a long time. Big Brother Fu Qing, look, we're back. We even brought my mother back. Yu said with a beaming smile. Turning her head to look at the place where her mother was, she said with a beaming smile, Big Brother Fu Qing, do you think my mother is beautiful? The one in red is my mother. Bo Qing looked at the extremely beautiful woman in red and couldn't help but widen his eyes and ask, Little Sister Yu, is your mother also an immortal? Does your mother know how to fly? Let me tell you something. A few months ago, a man with a tiger's waist and a bear's back came to find you. He said he was your uncle. He can fly. I saw him fly away. That is my uncle, but this time he didn't come with us. Yu said while grinning. At this moment, Old Master Pan stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Greetings, esteemed guests. Please come in, please come in. He gestured for them to enter the residence first. Please come in. Pan Hong and Pan Ning also bowed and gestured for them to enter. Fengjiu glanced at them, smiled slightly, and nodded before following them inside. Chapter 46-48. Old Man Pan and the others welcomed Fengjiu into the hall. They didn't dare to sit at the front, so they invited Fengjiu to sit at the front while they sat on the left and right. Compared to the Pan family's cautious and nervous adults, the Pan family's children, especially Bo Qing, were very excited. From time to time, he would gather around Mu Qin and Mu Yu and excitedly tell them that he had already started learning martial arts and was learning very well. Fengjiu glanced at the children and smiled. Then, she looked at the Pan family's old master and said, My name is Fengjiu, and I am the mother of these 3 children. Some time ago, something happened, and the children were stranded in the mortal world. I only found them not long ago. When I learned that they were being taken care of by you here, I specially came to thank you. We don't dare. Old Man Pan quickly said, Our Pan family is indebted to the young masters and young ladies. We don't dare to say thank you again. Fengjiu smiled and didn't say anything else. She just glanced at Pan Ning and looked at Pan Hong. Then, her eyes stopped at his legs. Hao told me that you have helped them a lot. Back then, when the first young master was ambushed, although he saved his life with a pill, he couldn't heal his legs. This time, I came to take a look at the first young master's legs. Thank you, madam. Old Man Pan stood up and bowed emotionally. They chatted in the hall for a while, but the city outside was in an uproar. Even the emperor, who was in the palace, had heard the secret guard report that the immortal had come to the Pan family. He, who was in the middle of a meeting with his officials, immediately dismissed them. Among them was Pan Ning's father. "Minister Pan, please wait." The emperor shouted and stood up. Pan Ning's father was startled and hurriedly turned back. He bowed with both hands and asked, "Your Majesty, do you have any other orders?" He was wondering why the emperor said to discuss it another day in the middle of the meeting. But the emperor's intentions were unpredictable and he didn't think too much about it. He thought that it was late and that it would be better to go home early for dinner. "Ha ha ha, Minister Pan. Wait a moment, I'll go with you after changing into casual clothes," he said with a smile, looking at him with eyes full of smiles. He didn't even give him time to respond. After giving him some instructions, he hurried back to the palace to change his clothes. Father Pan was in a daze as he stood there in a daze. He felt strange in his heart. Why did His Majesty want to go to their home again? What did he want to do this time? Could it be that something happened at home? For a moment, he felt a little uneasy as he waited. Once he was anxious and uneasy, he felt that time was passing too slowly. When he finally saw His Majesty in casual clothes with a few guards behind him, he hurried forward and asked, "Why does Your Majesty want to go to this old subject's house? Is there something wrong?" He, let's go. You'll know when you get there." The emperor didn't say much. He just smiled and strode out. Helpless, Father Pan could only quickly catch up. At this time, the Pan family was hurriedly preparing for the banquet. It was rare for the children to see each other, so they all went to the martial arts field to play. Fengzhou took advantage of this time to examine Pan Hong's legs. "It's not a big problem. We'll start the treatment tomorrow and he'll be able to stand in half a month," Fengzhou said and smiled as he looked at their surprised and shocked expressions. Chapter 46-49. "Yes, he will be able to stand in half a month." Fengzhou nodded. "Thank you, madam, thank you." The old master thanked her profusely. When Pan Hong heard that he would be able to stand in half a month, he could not hide his excitement. When the first madam heard this, she could not help but wipe away her tears and bow to Fengzhou gratefully. "Thank you, madam." "Madam, please have a meal in the front yard." Pan Ning made an inviting gesture and said, "My father is in the palace and has not returned yet. When he returns, he will pay his respects to madam." "No problem," Fengzhou said, indicating that there was no need to trouble him. Then, he walked towards the front yard accompanied by Pan Ning. The moment Pan Ning's father stepped out of the palace, the coachman came forward to congratulate him, saying that an immortal had come to the Pan family. Someone had also come to the Pan family and asked him to quickly return home. While he was pleasantly surprised, he also understood why the emperor wanted to accompany him to the Pan family. He turned around and saw that the emperor had already boarded a low-key but luxurious carriage. Only then did he quickly enter the carriage and ask the coachman to quickly return home. As expected, along the way, the commoners who recognized the Pan family's carriage came forward to congratulate them, saying that their family had a great fortune and that an immortal had come to visit. On the way back, he saw that there were many people gathered in front of the door. He asked people to disperse the crowd and personally welcomed the emperor, who was dressed in casual clothes. After entering the house, he asked people to close the door. "Your Majesty, please come in." Although Pan Ning's father wanted to quickly go in and see what was going on, he could not leave the emperor by his side. He could only ask him to go in first. The emperor wanted to see the immortal. Now that he had entered the Pan family, his footsteps quickened. When he reached the front yard, he saw the servants coming back and forth to serve the dishes. He could not help but smile. "It seems that I have come at the right time." Pan Ning's father smiled. "Since your Majesty is here, we will naturally eat together. Perhaps we can even see the immortal." The two of them talked as they walked inside. The emperor, who was walking in front, also slowed down his pace. When he saw the dazzling beauty in red sitting in the middle of the banquet, his breathing could not help but stagnate. Even his footsteps came to a stop. His eyes burned as he looked at the soul-stirring beauty. Could it be that this beautiful woman was a fairy? This was a peerless beauty that should only exist in the heavens. Even the 3,000 beauties in his harem could not compare to this woman. In particular, the noble and elegant temperament that naturally emanated from her body was even more impressive. She was like a dazzling sun. Wherever she appeared, no one else could be seen. His heart thumped slightly, but his breathing slowed down a little, as if he was afraid of startling the immortal. However, his burning eyes followed her closely, watching her every move, every frown and every smile. The more he looked, the more he felt that she was moving. The more he looked, the more his heart ached. Fengzhou immediately sensed that burning gaze, as if he had seen his prey, but he did not pay attention to it. However, he did not expect that the gaze would become more and more unbridled, causing the smile on her face, who was originally talking to Pan Ning and the others, to fade. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." Chapter 4650. His voice became heavier and carried a hint of anxiousness, which caused the emperor, who was intoxicated by Fengzhou's beauty, to come back to his senses. Cough. He uncomfortably clenched his fist and pressed it against his lips as he coughed lightly. He glanced at Pan Fu, then looked at the beautiful woman in red, and said, "Minister Pan, this lady should be the immortal, right?" Pan Fu wiped his sweat and said, "This subject has not seen her before, but since she appeared here, I think she should be." Pan Fu, Pan Hong, Pan Ning, and the others all noticed the emperor's arrival. They also noticed that the emperor looked at Fengzhou with the gaze of a man looking at a woman. If Fengzhou was an ordinary woman, then the emperor, as the ruler of a country, would naturally look at a woman with the gaze of a man. However, Fengzhou was not an ordinary woman. She was an immortal, a woman. Moreover, she was a female immortal who already had a husband and a child. For the emperor to look at her with such a gaze was a blatant offense. Seeing this, their hearts tightened, and they hurriedly stood up to mediate the situation. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Pan Hong and the others hurriedly stood up and bowed. I have come incognito, so there is no need for such formalities." The emperor smiled and waved his hand, his gaze still fixed on Fengzhou. He saw her sitting there, holding a wine cup in her hand and gently turning it. Her fair and slender fingers moved with the movement of the wine cup, giving off a seductive feeling. "Impudent." A reprimand came out of Ling Shuang's mouth, causing the emperor's mind to tremble. He recovered from his intoxicated state of staring at Fengzhou's fingers and swallowing saliva. He felt a little awkward and was unable to back down, and his face immediately turned green and white. A wave of pressure filled the air, and under this pressure, everyone felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on their chests. Even breathing was difficult. The one who felt the most uncomfortable was the emperor. He stood there, cold sweat seeping out of his forehead. The powerful pressure made him fearful, and he even had the urge to kneel down. However, Ling Shuang knew when to stop. She knew that if she made the emperor kneel in front of so many people in the Pan family, he would probably attack the Pan family out of shame and anger. Therefore, she only exerted pressure to make him uncomfortable, but did not directly force him to kneel. After a while, the emperor's clothes were drenched in cold sweat, and his legs were weak. At this time, Fengzhou said, "Okay, go and see if the children are here." "Yes." Ling Shuang then retracted her pressure and turned to leave. Seeing this, Master Pan hurriedly bowed to Fingzhou and said a few words of praise before hurriedly helping the emperor out. "Madam, please excuse me for a moment," Pan Hong said, bowing to Fingzhou before pushing his wheelchair away. "Madam, please don't be offended. His Majesty has been in power for a long time, so it's inevitable that he loses his sense of propriety sometimes," Master Pan said. Fengzhou smiled and said, "It looks like your emperor is not a smart person. As the ruler of a country, it's not good for the people to be so short-sighted." The Pan family did not dare to respond to this. Pan Ning only helped Fengzhou pour wine and talked about other things. On the other side, the emperor, who was being helped away by Master Pan, felt his legs go weak. He wanted to stand, but he could not. It was as if all his strength had disappeared. Chapter 46-51. Father Pan looked at him, hesitating to speak. He knew that the emperor was up to no good when he came to their house. This time, he had offended an immortal. Not only would he be in trouble, but he also didn't know if the immortal would blame the Pan family. "Master, eldest young master is here," the attendant outside reported. Hearing this, Father Pan looked at the emperor and said, "Your Majesty." "Let him in," the emperor said, sitting down weakly. Thus, Father Pan went to open the door personally. When he saw his eldest son pushing a wheelchair in, he helped push it in and only closed the door after he entered. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Pan Hong bowed from the wheelchair. "No need." The emperor waved his hand and looked at him, asking, "What are you here for? Do you want to invite me to the banquet?" "Your Majesty." Pan Hong looked at him with a serious expression and said, "Your Majesty, what I'm about to say may be disrespectful, but it's all for your own good. Please forgive me." Hearing this, the emperor's expression changed slightly, but he didn't say anything. He only said, "Then say it." "Yes." Pan Hong replied, then said, "I feel that Your Majesty's actions just now were inappropriate. That is an immortal, a person high up in the heavens. Even if Your Majesty is the ruler of a country, you can't offend an immortal like this. Your Majesty also knows about immortals' instincts. If they are angered, they can destroy our entire dynasty in an instant." Seeing that the emperor's face had changed greatly and seemed to be nervous, Pan Hongkai continued, "In the country under Your Majesty's control, having an immortal visit our dynasty is a great blessing that you can't even ask for. No matter which country's monarch receives the news, they will definitely express their goodwill to Your Majesty in order to befriend you. How can Your Majesty ruin such a good thing, such a great blessing because of your momentary confusion? Then according to your words, what should I do now?" He already knew the seriousness of the matter and the pros and cons. His head that had been blinded by the beauty also sobered up at this moment and hurriedly asked Pan Hong. After Pan Hong could no longer stand up, he resigned from his position and stayed at home. Since he was already a court official, he shouldn't have said such things. However, this matter didn't just concern the emperor, it also concerned the Pan family. Thus, he could only speak up boldly and tell him the pros and cons. Now that he saw that he was willing to listen, he relaxed slightly and said, "If Your Majesty listens to my words, you will personally apologize and then return to the palace." "Apologize?" The emperor was a little hesitant. As the ruler of a country, how could he swallow his pride and apologize? "If Your Majesty feels that it is inappropriate to go personally, you can return to the palace first and send someone to send some gifts as an apology." "My father and I will definitely put in a good word for Your Majesty in front of the immortal and ask for her forgiveness," Pan Hong said again. Hearing this, the emperor hurriedly said, that's good. We'll do as you say. I'll return to the palace now and have someone send over a generous gift. You must put in a good word for me in front of the immortals. I really didn't mean to offend you. Yes. Pan Hong replied. Seeing this, Pan Hong's father heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, I'll send you out. No need, no need. You can accompany the immortal. I'll leave on my own. He waved his hand and took a deep breath before walking out. A few guards escorted him out. Chapter 46-52. Fortunately, the emperor still valued his empire and was not blinded by beauty. Otherwise, they really didn't know how to clean up this mess. Let's go back to the banquet first. Father Pan said, gesturing for him to go forward with him. Pan Hong nodded his head and pushed the wheelchair forward. Father Pan saw this and didn't help him, because he was used to doing it himself. He only said, Our Pan family is really lucky. I didn't expect Hao-er's mother to come here personally. Yes, I didn't expect them to come again either. In his opinion, the three children had given them treasures before they left and had done so much for the Pan family. Even if there was any kindness, it should have been repaid long ago. Moreover, the Pan family hadn't done anything for them. If there was anything, it would have been for the period of time when they lived in the Pan family's home when they were stranded here. And this time, the Pan family knew that the other party didn't hide their identity as immortals when they came to the imperial city. Now that they came to their house, they brought glory to the Pan family. After today, everyone would know that the Pan family had some relationship with immortals. Everyone would have to treat them differently. Even if they weren't important officials in the imperial court, no one would dare to look down on them. When they came to the front of the banquet, the other people, including the children, had also arrived. The two of them came to Fingzhou's side. Father Pan said apologetically, Madam, I'm really sorry. Fingzhou raised his hand and interrupted him, saying, Forget it, there's no need to talk about other things. This time, we won't stay here for too long. Our main goal is to treat eldest young master's legs. Both of you, please take a seat. Seeing this, the two of them responded and sat down at the banquet. Perhaps it was because Fingzhou and the others were immortals, or perhaps it was because of the natural pressure that emanated from them that they were a little restrained. On the other hand, the children relaxed a little during the banquet, especially Bo Qing. It was rare for him to see his friends again, so he was always in a state of excitement. The Pan family chatted with Fingzhou and the others as they drank and chatted. It was late into the night before they went back to the courtyard to rest. Although it was late at night, 17, who came back with Fingzhou and the others, did not go back to rest. Instead, she gathered with her former Shadow Guard brothers. 17, I didn't expect you to become an immortal. What a great fortune. Yes. Who would have thought that you, 17, would become an immortal one day? You really make us envious. 17, tell us about the immortal world. Is there anything we haven't seen? Did the immortals fly in the sky? 17, can you fly? Many shadow guards surrounded 17 and asked enviously. There were so many of them, but only 17 had walked out. Moreover, it was second young master who gave him to young master Hao and asked him to follow them. They did not expect that he would receive the immortal fate. Chapter 46-53. Ever since 17 left with the three children, some of them wondered if 17 was already dead. After all, 17 had to protect the three children, and the place they were going to was probably filled with unknown dangers. Who would have thought that 17 was still alive and even obtained the immortal fate? This made them envious. 17 looked at them and said, "The immortal world is the same as the mortal world. It can even be said that it's more dangerous. With my skills, I don't even have a chance to fight back in front of those immortals. Furthermore, immortals don't even need to lift a finger to kill people. Just a wave of pressure is enough to crush people. You don't know this, but those beasts all have spiritual intelligence and their fighting power is very shocking." That night, 17 told his former brothers about the immortal world. Some were beautiful, and some were cruel. While they were amazed and envious, they were also shocked. They didn't expect that the immortal world was the same as their mortal world. There was an inescapable cruelty. However, even though they knew that there was killing there, they still yearned for it. After all, stepping into the immortal world meant that they had twice the lifespan of a mortal. Furthermore, they could see so many things that they had never seen before. Even though they knew that it was cruel, they still regretted that they didn't have the immortal fate. The next morning, Fengjiu helped Pan Hong to inject spiritual power into the silver needles to activate the blood vessels and meridians in his legs. He also asked someone to prepare a medicinal bath for him. Not long after he returned to the courtyard, he saw Pan Hong's father bringing over the gifts that the emperor had ordered people to send over. "Madam, these are the gifts sent by our emperor." Pan Hong ordered people to send the gifts to Fengjiu's courtyard and place them on the table. He said, "These can't be compared to the treasures that Madam has seen before, but it's still a small token of His Majesty's appreciation." Fengjiu smiled and said, "I'll give it to you. These things are useless to us." Seeing this, Pan Ning ordered people to send the gifts to the main courtyard. This was because they also knew that these things that they regarded as treasures were useless to immortals. Fengjiu slowly walked to the courtyard and sat down, watching the children play outside the courtyard. Father Pan and Pan Ning also sat down at the table under Fengjiu's signal. Pan Hong's legs only need 3 days to be pierced with silver needles. The rest of the time, he will slowly recover by soaking in the medicinal bath. When his legs are able to stand up and walk, let him walk more in the early morning every day. He will recover faster. Hearing Fengjiu's words, Father Pan and Pan Ning quickly responded, "Okay, we'll remember it." "Father. Grandpa, I want to cultivate like Sister Yu and Mu Qin." Fu Qing ran over and held Pan Ning's hand. "I want to be as powerful as them. Father, not only can I not beat Mu Qin, but I also can't beat you, He admitted that he was no match for Mu Qin, but why couldn't he even touch Yu's clothes? "Don't mess around." Pan Ning scolded. "I'm not messing around, I want to cultivate." He refused to admit defeat and was not afraid of his father's scolding. Instead, he went to his grandfather's side and tugged at his sleeve. Grandpa, I want to cultivate. I want to become very powerful." "Children shouldn't mess around," Father Pan said and patted his hand to comfort him. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.